Because I have to wait till just about 11 because there were a couple more coming, and so we had said 11. So you're not in class yet. So
well, what about some stories? What about some stories? Does anybody have any stories that you can tell? What about some stories? You have stories.
Well, yes.
Yeah. What about that?
Well, I'm Kathy Jensen. My family my mom and dad had 4 children, and then they had me 15 years later. And so I kept them all young and involved in Long Creek School. I just have so many good memories. It's just amazing. Betty Nielsen, Carl Lorenzen, Roger Nielsen were some of my classmates. Betty and I went the whole 8 years together. And others came, but they always left. Their parents couldn't take care of the farm, I guess. But I'm really proud to be from Long Creek School. I'll tell all my friends. Now a story. We were all playing tag, and I was running to escape someone's touch, and my panties fell down. So I was, what do you do in a case like that? You wouldn't want to leave it there for trash. So I scooped down and picked up my panties and went over and behind the boys' outhouse here. I put them back on and didn't run anymore that day.
Kathy,
Yes.
I have to add to that story. My name is Phil Lorenzen.
Yes.
And I shared that story with Marilyn, and I said, I can't wait to see Kathy talk about that story. And she said, you wouldn't dare, so you...
Obviously, she doesn't know me as well as you do.
Kathy, I think we're...
No.
I don't either.
I hope it wasn't Mrs. Osmera. I'll tell a story about her later.
Okay. She was our kindergarten teacher. My kindergarten teacher.
She was mean.
She was mean.
Yeah. Well, I'll share the story as long as I have the floor.
Yeah. She was fun.
My business was in banking and investments and so forth. And I was early into my career, 5 or 10 years and so forth. And I got a call one night and it said, this is Mrs. Osmera. Now we had lots of nice teachers, and my favorite one was Eanundrudi Rogers, because she was young and beautiful, and that was great. Mrs. Osmera was not. But she called and she said, you're Phil Lorenzen. I said, yes, that's correct. She said, well, I'm Mrs. Osmera. Oh, I said, well, that's great. She said, you were the worst student I ever had. And I said, I beg your pardon? She said, you were terrible. I said, you must have been thinking about my brother Carl. So I said, this conversation's over, and I hung up the phone. But I was humiliated by that.
Don't tell the rest of the story.
I don't remember the rest of the story.
You called me and said you fielded a telephone call for me. The old woodshed was right over here.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was in either kindergarten or first grade, Mrs. Osmera would pick me up like this and carry me out to the woodshed. I spent a lot of time over there. And we had the oil stove up front. And I don't know what I did, but I was dressed in my winter clothes. And she stood me by that oil stove. And then, of course, was it a mile home? I can't remember what it was walking. When I walked out that door, I was wringing wet. I came down with the worst cold in the world, so she wasn't my favorite teacher. But I probably deserved everything.
I was going to say, not that you guys were naughty or anything.
We didn't chew tobacco, though.
She wrote this, let's see, in 1975. Now, I've not read it lately. When Dolly Lorenzen asked some of the former teachers to talk about things that they remembered. And she did write this letter. Let's see if Carl's name is in there. Let's see. Well, I don't know that she calls them out by name.
What did she say?
I saw Johnny Carson. I was like, wait.
Yeah. Well, in your books,
All right, I'll read it.
it's all there. Yep. Yeah, it doesn't talk about you. It doesn't talk about you. But she does remember teaching at Long Creek. She does remember.
Is that all the same?
Yeah, why were you
That's
at
all
the
the same
woodshed
letter?
all the
No,
time?
this is something I did.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
That's where my brother experienced.
And
She
Ina Jean
didn't screw the rod. I got a spank.
Didn't have buses. I mean, a lot of kids rode horses to school, or you walked, or you rode your bike, or whatever.
Who are you?
Dan Nixon.
Thank you.
And in 1964, when President JFK was assassinated, I was at this school. Mom came and picked me up. And I remember that day. And they thought the world was coming to an end at that point in time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody was, we were waiting for the Russians to start, flying over and bombing us. And it was unbelievable, but I remember that to this day. That's one of the only times Mom picked me up from school. It was that day. It was scary for a lot of us. So.
I think a lot of us will remember where we were that day.
We had a typical in the school during that era. We had a fellow with the name of Henry Wilkie. I'm pretty good to remember it. And he was about 6 foot tall, big kid, about 16 years old. And as kids, sometimes we're not very nice to the boys like that. Just a short story. What he did, we were bullying him to a point that all of a sudden one day, instead of taking it out on us, he took off down through the schoolyard, leaped over the fence, and as he went over the fence, he caught his britches, ripped the whole back end out of his britches. And the last thing we saw was saw him as he was heading over the hill toward the outlets, and I had nothing. I got at the end of the story, but I had nothing about him or where he went, but he never came back. That was kind of a sad story, but
Sleigh ride out down the road from Long Creek.
Who are you?
Karen Nixon Anderson.
Oh, Karen Nixon. Hi.
But anyway, we'd get on these sleds and it'd be just slicker than all get out. And if we weren't in the field, we were going down the road, the lane, where it was, out there. And we'd have two on the sled and one standing on behind. And how we never got killed, I don't know. We'd go in the field and then we'd have a terrace that we could jump.
Oh my goodness.
It's amazing how daring we were. Such a small town. And then we used to play on the swings. We'd jump out. You get them going, and then you jump out. And then the other thing we always played was Annie over, throwing the ball over the roof to the other side, so somebody could get clobbered with that. So.
That's why I blame a lot of my deficiency about
Falling out of the swing.
falling out of the swing. And I landed on the sidewalk in front of the swing. Do you remember that? So I can corroborate that was a big time, but we loved that swing.
We did.
I went right back to it. Better. Oh.
I'll add to the swing if I could. We used to, remember, Kathy, we used to swing as high as we could and then jump out. That's what you were doing. But the seats were like 2 inches thick, and I jumped out one day and turned around and the swing knocked me out. I still have a little bump here from that. But I think Mrs. Osmera was the teacher. She didn't provide me much compassion.
No empathy there.
She was my teacher in 8th grade, and we hadn't had somebody that was really pushing us so that we could go on to Blair and be, and she did that. She saw that we learned everything we should, and we were ready to go to Blair High School.
Oh.
So
Who are you?
I have to give her credit for that.
Who are you?
Oh, Jenny Ward.
Okay, I think you were her favorite student.
I got straight A's.
Well, see?
But this is Phyllis Bellows, and she is Kathy's 20-year elder sister. And she turned 98 this week. Oh, okay, so, and I'm her daughter Debbie, and my sister Robin is here, and her husband and son. Anyway, the 1935 picture and 1936 picture, you see my mom, Phyllis Jensen, and you see there's brothers are in there too, but Virgil Vizina and the older one is Vernon Vizina were students there, and Virgil was just a little bitty guy, and his brother Vernon was big guy. I don't know how old he was, but Mom tells the story of one day this little Virgil was kind of a rascal, and he ran away from school, and the teacher had to go chase him down and bring him back, and then he was running all around the classroom, and the teacher was chasing him all around the classroom, and she finally got him cornered, and he said, Vernon, use your noodle, Vernon. But she doesn't remember what Vernon did to help out. And then the other thing I want to say is I hear a lot of talk of injuries. There were a lot of injuries. Mom also played Ollie Ollie over and free, and one day was running around the corner just as Lewis Nielsen was coming around. They knocked heads, and I think she got a concussion that day.
I was knocked out.
Knocked out, yeah. Knocked out, got her right in the temple with his chin. And then the other big injury was her mom and dad put her on a horse with a neighbor girl. Who was the neighbor girl?
Irene Jaspersen.
Irene Jaspersen to go to school, and she was behind Irene, hanging on to Irene on this horse, and did that for a while, right? That was the way she got to school for a while. But one day, as Irene was going into the barn with the horse, she forgot to tell Mom to duck, and just hit her right in the forehead. So that was another big injury. Were you knocked out that day, or? No, not knocked out. Just a little bit of just a slight head injury that day.
On the property, because I know, like, my husband went to ranch school, and his teacher lived. Like, they always had school, no matter what.
In the 1800s and early 1900s, they typically stayed with a family, and they rotated in that process. So later on, they obviously had automobiles and they drove.
Yeah.
And I would share one quick story, again, Phil Lorenzen, but in addition to our grandparents attending school, there are 3 generations of us got through that somehow. But during the process, I had on my mother's side of the family, I had my grandmother, Mary Mortensen, taught at Longcreek, so she taught my other grandparents, or my parents and great uncles, and then she got married, and she had no place to live. Nobody could keep her and her husband, so she resigned as the teacher, and her younger sister took over the teacher. But during that time, that was in the 1800s, why they did stay in houses and rotate around the neighborhood.
Well, did most of the teachers live with you guys, Eanundrudi?
I don't know where they, no, I think they rotated with families. I think it passed, probably the Jensens had them housed and so forth. It rotated between families, not all year round, yeah.
Yeah.
This has been such fun to be here with all of you. I wish more people had come if they'd been around, but Long Creek School has meant a lot to me all the years. He knows for sure. He's heard about him for 55 years. But thank you all for making the effort to come, and thank you for being the good people you are. And I know you're all good people, because we went to Long Creek School. And some of us even liked Mrs. Osmer.
May I say something? I'm Jeff, I'm Kathy's husband. I just want to give some recognition to the Allen family,
Oh, yeah.
who provided funds to help make this possible. Thank you.
Yes.
Carl Lorenzen made a reservation at the Longhorn. And anybody that is an alum or their significant other, their companion, their driver are welcome to join us over there, and
That's
we
where
will
we
treat
were
you
going to
to
go for lunch. Seriously, I'm serious.
Donors don't qualify, but schoolmates do. So
Oh,
head over there if you're interested.
here,
We'll take
here,
care of it.
here.